The night she decided to disappear, no one stopped her. Not the doorman who had opened doors for her for 6 years. Not the assistant who sent 3 reminders about tomorrow's board call. Not the news anchor on television discussing her latest acquisition as if she were a chess player moving cities instead of companies. To the world, she was untouchable. To herself, she was unbearably alone. Clara Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Holdings, tech investor, real estate mogul, billionaire before 40, stood in front of her penthouse mirror and studied the woman staring back at her. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect reputation. No warmth in her eyes. She reached for the silk blouse hanging beside her and paused. No, not tonight. Tonight she wanted to be ordinary. She changed into a faded gray sweater, the kind with a tiny thread pulling loose near the hem, worn black flats. No jewelry except a simple watch that had once belonged to her father, the only person who had ever loved her before she became valuable. She left her designer handbag on the marble counter. Instead, she grabbed a canvas tote. For the first time in years, she walked out of her building without anyone announcing her name. 3 blocks away stood a neighborhood steakhouse. Warm lights, fogged windows, families inside. It wasn't the kind of place billionaires went. That's exactly why she chose it. When she pushed open the door, the scent of grilled meat and butter wrapped around her. Laughter bounced off the walls. Baby cried somewhere near the back. Silverware, clit. No one turned their head. No one recognized her. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt like proof. The hostess barely glanced at her sweater before grabbing a menu. Table for one? The words stung more than they should have. Yes, she was seated near the back. Vinyl booth, slight tear in the seat, sticky edge on the table from where someone hadn't wiped it properly. She sat down and folded her hands. Across from her, a couple fed each other bites of mashed potatoes. At another table, a father helped his daughter cut her steak. Clara opened the menu. Ribeye, $39. Filet, $44. She could buy the building if she wanted. But she stared at the prices longer than necessary because once, years ago, those numbers would have mattered. Back when her father worked double shifts. Back when she counted coins. Back when steak was something you saw in commercials. A shadow fell across the table. Good evening, she looked up. Her waiter stood there, early 40s maybe. Hair slightly graying at the temples. Shirt clean, but worn thin. Shoulders carrying something heavier than plates. His name tag read, Daniel. There was exhaustion in his eyes, but not bitterness. What can I get you to drink? He asked. Just water, he nodded. No judgment, no forced smile. Just steady calm. When she ordered the ribeye, no sides, she saw something flicker in his expression. Not disapproval. Recognition, like he'd seen someone make that choice before as he walked away. Clara noticed the bottom of his shoe worn, nearly splitting at the sole. Something in her chest tightened. Her steak arrived. Perfectly cooked. Daniel set it down gently. Let me know if you need anything. His voice was quiet, almost careful. She cut into the meat, perfect yet. Every bite felt heavier than the last. The noise around her amplified the silence. Inside her, she glanced around. Families, friends, everyone sharing something. She checked her phone, 300 unread. Emails, 2 missed calls from investors. An article draft asking for her comment. On a billion-dollar merger, she turned the screen off. Tonight she didn't want power. She wanted presence. Halfway through her meal, she noticed something strange. Daniel passed her table 3 times. Each time, his eyes paused for half a second. Not staring, studying, concerned. She felt exposed when she finished eating. She reached into her tote for cash. She didn't want to use a black card with her name engraved on it. She didn't want attention. She counted the bills carefully. That's when she noticed the folded paper tucked beneath her plate. Her breath slowed. She hadn't seen him place it there. She lifted the plate slightly and slid the note free. Her hands trembled. She didn't know why. She unfolded it. 7 words written in neat blue ink. Tonight's meal is on me. She blinked. Read it again. Her heart didn't just skip. It stalled. Why would he do that? She looked up. Daniel was across the restaurant, balancing plates for a family of 5. He didn't look at her. This wasn't flirtation. It wasn't performance. It was quiet, intentional. She stared at the hole in his shoe again. The tired lines on his face. He didn't have money to spare, so why give it away? Clara stood slowly. She left a crisp $50 bills on the table, then she walked out. Cool night air hit her face. She walked half. A block stopped. Her fingers tightened around the folded note in her pocket. No one had paid for her meal since her father died. No one had looked at her like she wasn't. It's powerful but human. She turned around, walked back inside. The hostess blinked. "Did you forget something?" Yes, Clara said softly. "I did." She found Daniel near the kitchen doors. When he saw her, concern crossed his face. "Was something wrong with your steak?" She held up the note. "Why did you do this?" He glanced around, then gestured to an empty booth. They sat across from each other. Up close. She saw the small scars on his knuckles, the frayed collar, the fatigue that doesn't come from one bad night but years of carrying responsibility alone. "I didn't mean to offend you." "Said you didn't," she replied, though her voice shook. "Then why?" She pressed. He studied her carefully. "I've seen that look before." "What look?" "The one that says you're surrounded by noise, but no one sees you." Her throat tightened. "You thought I couldn't afford it?" He shook his head gently. "No. Then what?" He met her eyes. "I thought you needed to know someone cared." Silence wrapped around them. "I'm fine," she said automatically. He smiled faintly. "So am I." The answer hit her harder than anything else. Across the restaurant, a child laughed. Daniel leaned back slightly. "My wife passed 3 years ago," he said quietly. "Cancer. I've been raising my son alone. Some nights, I come here early before my shift and sit at that table." He nodded toward hers. "I order the cheapest thing on the menu and pretend I'm not exhausted." Her defenses cracked further. "Why pay for mine?" "Because tonight," he said softly, "you looked more tired than I feel." The words broke something open inside her. No boardroom ever had. No headline ever had. No billion-dollar deal ever had. A man who barely had enough chose to give. Not for praise, not for return. Just because he understood. Loneliness. Clara swallowed hard. "You don't even know who I am." He gave a small knowing smile. "You're someone who needed kindness." And for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a billionaire, not as a brand, not as a success story, as a person, but neither of them knew that by the end of this week, the entire restaurant would learn exactly who she was and the meaning of that simple note, which would change Daniel's life forever. The next evening, Clara returned. Not in silk, not in diamonds, not with security trailing behind her. The same gray sweater, the same worn flats, the same canvas tote. But this time, she wasn't there to disappear. She was there because something inside her had shifted. The bell above the steakhouse door chimed as she entered. The hostess looked up, recognition flickering briefly across her face before she masked it with polite indifference. "Table for one?" "Yes," Clara answered calmly, as she followed. The hostess inside, she noticed Daniel near the bar, carrying a heavy tray. When he saw her, surprise crossed his face, followed by something softer relief. But before he could step toward her, another man intercepted. Tall, perfectly styled hair, crisp shirt, gold. Watch visible beneath his cuff. The manager, his name tag read, Victor. He scanned Clara quickly. Sweater, flats, canvas bag, and his smile thinned almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid we're quite full tonight," he said smoothly. Clara glanced around. Several tables were clearly empty. "I don't mind waiting," she replied evenly. Victor's eyes lingered on her clothes again. "We prioritize reservations." Daniel had approached quietly, tray now gone. "We have space near the back," he said carefully. Victor shot him a sharp look. "That section is for higher-paying guests." The words were subtle, polite, but sharp. Clara felt the shift in the room. A few nearby diners looked over. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She paid full price yesterday," he said gently, "and tipped generously." Victor's expression hardened. Daniel, I'll handle this. Clara stepped forward slightly. It's fine, she said, her voice calm but firm. If you don't have room, I'll leave. Victor gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Phew, for understanding. Daniel looked stricken. Clara turned toward the door, and that's when it happened. Two men in tailored suits walked in behind her, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Did you see the market response? One said. She hasn't been seen publicly all week. They froze mid-step. Their eyes locked on Clara. Confusion. Then shock. Miss Whitmore. The room quieted. Victor blinked. Clara turned slowly. The men stepped forward quickly, almost stumbling in their haste. Clara Whitmore, one repeated. From Whitmore Holdings? A ripple moved through the restaurant. Daniel looked from Clara to Victor. Back to Clara. Victor's face drained of color. Clara's expression didn't change. Yes, she said simply. The silence deepened. Clara held up a hand. No. Victor stopped mid-sentence. I asked for a table for one, she said calmly. Yesterday, that wasn't a problem. Victor swallowed. Daniel said nothing. Clara looked directly at the manager. Would you have? Turned me away if I'd walked in wearing a designer coat. Victor hesitated. That's not what this is about. Never is, she replied softly. The weight of the room shifted. Clara turned to Daniel. Is that table in the back still available? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, then I'll sit there. She walked past Victor without another word. Daniel followed, still processing. As she sat down, he leaned closer. You're Clara Whitmore? She met his eyes. Yes. He studied her face. Then after a long pause, he said something that surprised her more than Victor's reaction ever could. I'm glad you came back as yourself. She blinked. I didn't. He smiled faintly. You did. Across the room, Victor stood frozen, realizing far too late that the woman he dismissed wasn't just a customer, she was the owner of the building. And by morning, he would learn that respect costs far less than arrogance. The restaurant had never felt so quiet. Even the clinking of glasses seemed softer. Like the walls themselves were listening. Victor stood near the entrance pretending to check reservations, but his eyes kept drifting toward the back corner. Toward Clara. Toward the woman he had almost turned away. Daniel set a glass of water in front of her. His movements steady, though his thoughts were clearly racing. You didn't have to say anything, he said quietly. Clara folded her hands on the table. I didn't plan to. Then why did you? She glanced across the room at Victor. Because some lessons don't land unless they're heard. Daniel exhaled slowly around them. Whispers floated. That's really her?
What?
She owns half the downtown properties. I saw her in Forbes. Clara had spent years commanding rooms much larger than this one. But tonight, the attention felt different. Not earned, not deserved. Just triggered by status. Daniel leaned in slightly. You're not upset? He asked. About what? How he treated you, she thought for a moment. I'm not upset for me. He waited. I'm upset for the woman who comes in tomorrow wearing the same sweater and doesn't get recognized. Daniel's eyes softened. That answer told him more about her than the headlines ever could. Victor finally approached the table, posture stiff, smile rehearsed. Ms. Whitmore, he began carefully. I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding earlier. Clara looked up calmly. What misunderstanding? Victor swallowed. We value all guests equally. Daniel didn't move. Clara tilted her head slightly. Do you? Victor hesitated. Yes, of course. Then yesterday, she said gently, why was there no hesitation seating me? Victor's jaw tightened. Circumstances were different. They weren't, Clara replied. Only my perceived value was. The words hung heavy in the air. Nearby diners pretended not to listen, and listened anyway. Victor shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, we treat everyone with respect. Clara leaned back. Respect isn't a reaction to wealth, she said quietly. It's a reflection of character. Daniel felt something shift inside him as she spoke. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about truth. Victor cleared his throat. If there's anything we can do to make this right, there is, Clara interrupted gently. He straightened immediately. Yes, promote him. Shh. Toward Daniel, Victor blinked. What? He defended a customer without knowing her net worth. That's leadership. Daniel's eyes widened. Clara, Daniel, she corrected softly. You called me by my name? Victor looked stunned. That's a significant decision. Clara met his gaze evenly. You said you value all guests equally. Silence, then she added, almost casually. I also own this building. The words didn't come with pride, they came with quiet certainty. Victor's face went pale. Daniel stared at her. You, yes? Shh. Said. The weight of that reality settled over the restaurant. I don't want special treatment, Clara continued. I want better treatment for everyone. Victor's composure cracked slightly. I understand. No, she said gently. You're about to. She stood. Tomorrow morning, I'll be reviewing the lease agreements for all my commercial properties. Victor's breathing shifted. Daniel watched her carefully. You won't lose your job tonight, Clara added calmly. But you will decide whether you deserve it. Victor nodded stiffly. She turned back to Daniel. I meant what I said yesterday. About what? He asked. Kindness? He looked down briefly. I didn't know you were a billionaire, she finished. He nodded once. She gave a small, almost sad smile. And I didn't know you were stronger than most executives I hire. That made him laugh under his breath. The tension in the room eased. Slightly, Clara reached into her tote and placed something on the table. Not money. A business card, but not the kind. Embossed in gold. Simple, clean, direct. If you ever want to talk about more than steak, she said, call me. Daniel stared at it. Not for opportunity, not for wealth, but because someone, as powerful, had seen him not as staff, as capable, as worthy, as equal Clara. Picked up her tote as she walked toward the door. The room parted slightly, not out of fear. Out of realization, Victor remained frozen near the host's stand. Daniel stood still, card in hand. He had paid for her dinner, and somehow she had just invested in his future. Outside, the night air felt different. For both of them, because sometimes power doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in wearing a gray sweater and leaves behind a mirror no one can ignore. The next morning, the steakhouse felt different. Not louder, not busier. Heavier. Victor arrived an hour early, something he hadn't done in years. He adjusted. Table settings that were already straight and wiped down a counter that didn't need wiping, because today, the building owner wasn't just a name on paperwork. She had sat at table 12. Daniel walked in 10 minutes later, carrying the same worn backpack he always did. He looked tired but focused. Victor cleared his throat. Daniel. My office now. The tone wasn't hostile, it was nervous. Inside the cramped office behind the kitchen, Victor shut the door. I want to clarify something, he began carefully. About last night. Daniel stood calmly. There's nothing to clarify. Victor's jaw tightened. You embarrassed me? Daniel's eyes didn't move. I defended a guest. Victor leaned back in his chair. She could shut this place down. Daniel paused. She could, he agreed quietly, but she didn't. The words lingered. Victor rubbed his temples. You think this is about integrity? He muttered. I know it is, Daniel replied. There was no anger in his voice, no arrogance, just truth. Before Victor could respond, a knock came at the door. The hostess leaned in. There's someone here to see you. Victor frowned. Who? She didn't give a name. Daniel didn't need to guess. Clara stood near the entrance again. Same gray sweater, same flats. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a sharply dressed woman holding a tablet, her legal advisor. The restaurant had gone silent. Victor stepped forward quickly. Ms. Whitmore, good morning, Clara said calmly. Her voice wasn't cold. It was clear. I won't take much of your time. Victor forced a smile. Of course. Please, my office. No, she interrupted gently. Out here is fine. Everyone could hear. Cooks, servers, guests finishing late breakfasts. Clara turned slightly, addressing not just Victor but the room. Last night, I was reminded of something important. She glanced at Daniel. That character is revealed when no one is watching. Victor swallowed. Clara continued. This building has housed this restaurant for 12 years. The lease renews every 5. Victor nodded stiffly. Yes. My team reviewed the file this morning. A woman beside her tapped the tablet. Your rent will not increase this year. Victor blinked. What? A ripple moved through the staff. Clara held his gaze. But there's a condition. The air tightened. Mandatory hospitality training for all management staff. Emphasis on bias awareness and equal service standards. Victor's face flushed. You're punishing me, no, Clara said evenly. I'm investing in improvement. She stepped closer. Because power isn't meant to intimidate. It's meant to elevate. Silence. Then she turned to Daniel. And as for you? He straightened slightly. You offered kindness without knowing who I was. He nodded once. I would have done it for anyone. I know, she said softly. That's why you're being promoted. Victor stiffened. Clara didn't look at him. Assistant floor manager, effective immediately. Gasps filled the room. Daniel blinked. I don't have experience, you have integrity, Clara replied. That's harder to teach. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it, because legally he had no ground. Clara faced him calmly. You'll mentor him. It wasn't a threat, it was an opportunity. Victor looked at Daniel really looked at him, perhaps. For the first time, Daniel didn't gloat, didn't smile smugly. He simply stood there. Steady Clara's advisor stepped forward, handing Victor updated paperwork. We'll follow up next week, she said professionally. Clara picked up her tote before leaving. She turned once more to the staff. Every guest who walks through these doors carries something you can't see. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. Treat them like it matters. Then she looked at Daniel, because it does. She walked out. The bell chimed behind her. Silence lingered. Then slowly, quietly, the room began to breathe again. Victor stared at the papers in his hand. Daniel stood still, absorbing the moment, not triumphant, not shocked, just aware. Kindness had not only been returned, it had multiplied, and for the first time in a long while, the steakhouse felt like a place where respect wasn't priced by appearance. It was earned by character. 3 days after the promotion, Daniel stood in front of the mirror in his small apartment, adjusting a tie he hadn't worn in years. Assistant floor manager? The title still felt unfamiliar. Behind him, a small voice called out, Dad, are you nervous? Daniel smiled at the reflection of his 8-year-old son, Liam, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a comic book in his lap. Maybe a little, Daniel admitted. Why? Because sometimes when life changes fast, you want to make sure you deserve it. Liam shrugged thoughtfully. You do. Daniel laughed softly. Why's that? Because you're the nicest person I know? The simplicity of it hit him harder than any promotion ever could. That evening, Clara returned again, not announced, not escorted, just present. She noticed the difference. Immediately, staff greeted guests with eye contact. Smiles felt real. Victor, though still reserved, carried himself differently, measured. Aware, Daniel approached her table with more confidence now. Good evening, Clara. Good evening. Mr. Manager, she teased lightly. He shook his head. Still, Daniel, she smiled. I prefer that. Yes. He handed her the menu. She noticed something softer in his expression. You look different, she observed. Promotion suits you. It's not the title, he replied. It's the responsibility. Before she could respond, the restaurant door opened. A small boy stepped in. Holding tightly to Daniel's hand, Clara looked up in surprise. Daniel cleared his throat. I hope you don't mind. I wanted you to meet someone. Liam stepped forward shyly. This is my son. Clara's face softened immediately. Hi, Liam. He studied her carefully. Are you the lady Dad helped? Clara blinked. Yes. Liam nodded seriously. He said you were lonely. The room seemed to pause. Daniel looked embarrassed. I didn't say it like that. It's okay, Clara interrupted gently. She looked at Liam. And your dad helped me more than he knows. Liam considered that. Did you help him too? Clara glanced at Daniel. I'm trying. Daniel pulled out a chair for his son at a nearby booth. He insisted on seeing where I work now, he explained quietly. Clara watched as Liam looked around proudly. Like the restaurant belonged to his father in a way. It did now. Why did you really come back? Daniel asked softly once Liam was distracted with crayons. Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched father and son laugh over a badly drawn dinosaur. Because I realized something, she said finally. What? Wealth builds walls. Daniel listened. Kindness builds doors. He absorbed that in silence. Across the room, Victor approached another guest, this time with genuine courtesy. Change wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Clara reached into her tote and slid an envelope across the table. Daniel frowned. What's this? An invitation. He opened it slowly. Inside was a formal letter. A proposal. Clara's foundation was launching a scholarship program for children of single parents in service industries. Liam's name was at the top of the list. Daniel's throat tightened. Clara, this is too much. No, she said gently. It's exactly enough. He looked at her carefully. You're not doing this because of guilt, are you? She smiled faintly. No. Then why? Because your note changed me? The words settled between them. You reminded me that impact doesn't start with money, she continued. It starts with empathy. Liam suddenly ran over, holding up his drawing. Dad, look. It was a stick-figure family. 3 people. Daniel, Liam, and a woman in a gray sweater, Clara, stared at it. You forgot the steak, she joked lightly. Liam grinned. You can come over for dinner. Instead, Daniel chuckled nervously. Clara felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Not loneliness, possibility. Outside. The city moved as it always did, fast, loud, indifferent. But inside this small restaurant, something rare was growing. Not romance built on status. Not gratitude built on debt. Respect built on recognition. Clara looked at Daniel. You paid for my meal, she said quietly. He smiled, and you paid it. Forward. She shook her head softly. No. Her eyes moved too. Liam, you paid for something I couldn't buy. Daniel's voice lowered. What's that? She met his gaze fully. A reminder that I'm human first. Silence wrapped around them. Warm, steady. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel invisible. She felt included.